Welcome, everyone. I see there's a couple more people coming in, so we will give it a couple of seconds if people start coming in. You may notice that we are in a different format from the normal webinar, which is a kind of a meeting format. And we did this so that we can have a discussion as opposed to you just listening to a panelist. So feel free to have cameras on or off, that is fine. Using the hand raising if you have something that you want to comment on, or if you don't feel comfortable and want someone to just read it, you could put it in the chat and we will make sure we monitor all of that. But I'm excited to talk about this topic. Today, we are here with the Black Caucus, with Rock, our vice chair, and Wendelin, our chair of the Black Caucus, in which we are going to be discussing the meaning of Juneteenth for higher ed. This was an article that was inside Higher Education. I will make sure I'll copy that link just in case you did not have a chance to read that. And it's just talking about Thomas A. Parham and how he reflects on how higher education can make substantive changes to support Black excellence. So I just wanted to talk about it. Let's dive right on in. If you did have a chance to read it, the basis of this came because there was a symposium that I believe it was California State. Yes, California State University system had their first Juneteenth symposium, in which they had a couple of questions that I feel like we can kind of talk over here. First question was, what does the celebration of Juneteenth really mean? The second question was, how do we elevate the voices of our ancestors and everyday people in this discourse on higher education? And the third question was, and given the state of Black students, staff, faculty, and senior administrators in higher education, how do we prevent wings from breaking and mend those whose structurally integrity has been compromised by the inattention and outright bias and neglect of resources that would otherwise contribute to a more successful outcome in which those groups currently realize? I'm going to throw it to Rock to start us off, because I know that he may be able to talk more about when I had said broken wings and mend. And then we can go from there.
Sounds good. I'd like to echo Portia's and Wendelin's sentiments. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your time. I know that summer's here. Hopefully schedules are light, and that means you really want to be here. And so we appreciate it. As we talk about Juneteenth and what it means, I think we have to look at it in two ways. I think extrinsically, we kind of understand, Juneteenth from a very performative narrative. It's the celebration of delayed liberation. It's when, the U.S. armies marched into Texas and essentially liberated the last enslaved groups of people within the United States, and I think that's kind of understood. I think intrinsically, if you were to ask me, I would say that Juneteenth was very much a canary in the coal mine, as Dr. Parham put it. It was kind of a, sneak peek of what was to come. Within the article, I think Dr. Parham did an excellent job of talking about what's kind of this idea of broken contracts and broken promises. We can look at, amendments to the Constitution, Brown v. the Board of Education, exclusion from the GI benefits, farming subsidies. I think the gap within education, if you look at Brown v. the Board of Education and how that really played out in some of those broken contracts and promises. So I think this idea of Juneteenth really has to be better understood in its current context. Earlier, I was talking about, I think it's a bit unfortunate that it boils down to a barbecue and a day off. I think it's much deeper than that. We talked about this idea of Hollywood and how they portray the civil rights movement and how they make you think, well, they just wanted to eat at a lunch counter. No, they wanted to survive and live equitably within the world where there's a fair share given the social contract that everyone bought into. So I think as we look at Juneteenth, we have to look at it in those two ways, intrinsically, extrinsically. And as President Parham said, we have to better understand ways we can correct and shift towards scalable change and not just outwardly celebrate it with rib tips and paid vacations. Yes, Simone? Oh no, I think she, yeah.
That's, hey, start them off young.
Yeah. We all have, well, some of us have little ones, yeah.
Yeah. What is there anyone else that has any comments to Juneteenth? Or I mean, we could even start with, did you even know there was a Juneteenth even existed before it was named a holiday and officially a holiday and people were off? Yeah, I see you, Jamie. Yeah, no, I'm gonna be honest. Make snatch a couple points of, because I'm here in the Midwest. I didn't really know what a Juneteenth was. I had heard of it, and it was not anything that was celebrated in my house. So, Sierra.
Yes, hello, my name is Sierra. I'm joining you from the great state of Texas. So where Juneteenth was originated, right? So I actually grew up in Houston, Texas. So I always had an awareness of Juneteenth being really close to Galveston. I will actually be in Galveston on Juneteenth this year. But yeah, I definitely knew about it, and I didn't always grow up celebrating it, but a lot of my friends who I met in college, they're from, being from like certain areas in Texas, in Houston, which we call wards. There'll be Juneteenth parades, celebrations. There's now a Juneteenth museum in Galveston on the Strand. So there's definitely some more work towards recognizing, now that we have it as a federal holiday, just more recognition. I work at the University of North Texas, and Ms. Opal Lee is actually an alum of UNT, which is where I work. So she was just in my building a couple weeks ago, actually doing an interview on Juneteenth. So I definitely feel very immersed in things Juneteenth, and I look forward to people, not even just Black people, but everybody, recognizing and understanding what this day really is. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that. I absolutely love that. Jamie, I think I saw your hand up, but you don't have to. You can tell me like, oh no, never mind.
You're talking to me?
Yes.
Oh no, I didn't know what it was until the holiday was implemented. California, and I thought we had a pretty progressive education where I was from, but it was not introduced until I think during the pandemic. Yeah.
Yep. We talk about, as Rock mentioned, it is starting to become performative, but I feel like this is a lot of holidays do, but if we're talking about holidays that promote what people of color have achieved in history, this goes along the lines with Martin Luther King as well. What do we do on that day? We're just off. We're off, and do we do anything? And how can we get away from just being off and just going, whoo, I'm off of work and I don't have to do anything? What can that look like in your institution? And that was kind of how the summary of this article went. So it's great. Gwendolyn, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, and I will say I did grow up being aware of Juneteenth, but just because I have a very radical father who, he raised us with that knowledge, and that has not been typical, even in the Black community. I think there was a large part of the Black community that just didn't know about Juneteenth, or may have heard about it, but didn't really have an understanding of what it really meant. I think it was looked at sometimes with the same level of confusion as like Kwanzaa. and things like that. It's like, oh, okay, that's kind of what they're doing. So, but at least I did have the awareness. And I was just kind of thinking about that first question. And Rock spoke exactly a lot of the things that I was thinking in terms of acknowledging it. What does it mean? How do we honor? What are our true steps in recognition of something like this? But something else that came to mind also was the kind of a recognition, and this is over an overall conversation, that recognition that in the midst of change, some people take longer to get the memo. It's not a smooth process, and you think today in the day and age of Google and TikTok and everything, that everybody knows everything immediately, and that's still not the case. And that just serves as evidence that continuation and growth, recognition, and that was one of the other questions, and using voices, being vocal, but also being instructional on how we get the message out, and then what do we do? How do we honor it? How do we celebrate it? Things like that. And I see Miss Jackie Carter has her hand up.
Miss Jackie, you
Just
are
like
muted
president.
still, but I just want everyone to
is it-
know this
Is it working now?
Yes, it is. So
Okay.
we have our president of AACRAO here at this, so please take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to start off by answering your question, Portia. Did I know about Juneteenth prior to the holiday? Or let's say prior to 2020, actually. And yes, I did. I have a good friend who is like an old soul, and she is truly embodies the Blackness. So we would celebrate Juneteenth, and we would celebrate Kwanzaa, and we would celebrate it with food, of course, traditional foods. And she would bring in African artifacts and books, and she would bring in, now we live in a city, bring in Black cowboys and horses, and have educational programs for the kids to really educate them about our African ancestors and about that day, and the same thing for Kwanzaa. But my other question is for us, because I keep hearing us talk about being off for that day. My university is not closed on that day. And the funny thing is, well, not funny, but in 2020 and talking about Juneteenth and how it becomes a federal holiday, there seemed to be a push that, it will be a closed, observed day as with other days. But as we see, as I said in yesterday in our Black Caucus call, things kind of change in January of 2021. And so some of that we need to do more and do better kind of change. And I think that was one of those things that changed too. While it is a federal holiday, it is not one that is places are closed and across the board. And so I was just like, I'm not closed. And I'm hearing you all say closed. I'm like, no, we're not closed. And I had just sent a message we have a committee on my campus, and I just sent a message earlier today and said, we should have sent out a message saying we should all take off on Monday. And I wonder if they would have recognized, sorry, y'all, how many Black people was not at work today. And then what that would have how that message would have landed on them. But we didn't do that in time. So, but I was just curious to that fact, because I'm hearing close.
You know what? It never even dawned on me. Thank you for saying that. I didn't realize I was doing. I think federal holiday, I feel like everybody was off. So I'm shocked, and I would love to hear everyone else's opinion on not being off, and how do you, especially, I would like to hear everyone's opinion on not being off and how you feel about it, and people of color, how you feel about it. Leslie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off what everyone has been saying about a federal, while it is a federal holiday, all the states have the final decision over whether or not their employees will be off. I think if I read correctly, I think it's like at 24 states have it off. A couple of states have it as a floating holiday. My institution is not off. And I'm not sure. We have a floating holiday for the year, but I don't know if it's related to Juneteenth or not. But I just wanted to make mention of that while it is a federal holiday, it's not necessarily a state holiday.
Thank you. Roz?
Rosalind?
You know, I can't ever find that unmute thing. Anyway, hello, good afternoon, everyone. So last year, my institution where I am now, last year, apparently they hadn't gotten the memo because they scheduled a training. I remember I just started June the 6th, and they had scheduled a training for faculty for our first year orientation. And so I said, that's a holiday. And, and so they were like, oh yeah, well, we know, but that was the only day that all the faculty were available. And then so I just cut the side eye and I said, well, I won't be here. And I wasn't here. This year it was acknowledged more. And so the college is closed. I worked at an institution a couple of years ago where they don't close for Martin Luther King Day. And they work for Martin Luther King Day. However, the staff have to be there. There's no classes for students, but it's an entire day of service projects, programming, for the entire campus community. So the one piece, while yes, it's a holiday, and like Rock said, I think we need to take it further than just having a day off and having some ribs or what have you. But then I'm also thinking, is it such a bad thing if an institution is not closed, but use that day to do that programming, or to make there be opportunities for service projects or things that are Juneteenth related. If the institution is going to be open, make it count. That's like Dr. Parham said in his article. He said, if Juneteenth is to have a real meaning and not simply represent another programmatic initiative, we need to feel good about, then our efforts must result in, and then he had 3 bullet points. So for institutions that are not closed, why can't they use that as an example of those 3 bullet points and have that programming effect? Even if we don't have a summer term here. So even if our students are not here, why can't our faculty and staff, if we were open, why can't our faculty and staff that are available, gather and work on programming and wraparound support for our incoming students of color? Make it meaningful.
Yeah, when I landed at Arcadia, I'm sorry, Leslie, your hand is up. I think maybe not.
Sorry, I meant to put it down.
Oh, okay. No, I was going to say, when I landed at Arcadia, a similar situation. It was kind of a floating holiday. The very next year, we instated it as a recognized holiday, but we also, to your point, Roz, we added it as a call to service. So we encouraged our students, faculty, and staff. There's a lot going on within the Philadelphia city itself, within our region. And so we encourage teams and groups of students to participate around the area, and it's gaining traction. And so this year, hopefully there's more participation. And I think that type of intentionality towards problem solving, I think is kind of, integral as we think about the healing process from Juneteenth and enslavement of our people. Rosalind, Portia is in transit, and so she'll be jumping on and off, but we can keep the conversation going. Now, earlier, Roz, you mentioned that year one, you kind of put your foot down and you said, you know what, I'm taking it off. Were there any repercussions of that?
No, no, no. Uh-uh.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That means that they definitely supported you and valued you and understood the assignment, and they corrected it the following year. Has anyone ever ran into any issues trying to take that day off or any other type of holiday, MLK Day, any other type of holiday at your institutions, past or current?
Okay, while folks are thinking, I'll chime in, but start talking or raise your hand and I will stop immediately. And I'll say at my previous institution, MLK Day was not a day that was taken off, but it was considered a service day. And all staff were encouraged to go out and be of service, do something meaningful on that day, as opposed to being a day off versus where I am now. Where it is a day off, and it's a double-edged sword. I think at my previous institution, even though the day was not off, it seemed to be an expectation that most of the Black people would probably take that day off. And people say, "Oh, you're not taking the day off," and I say, "Well, why?" There's service that could be done here, and there's things going on campus, and that could be of use.
And these were your white colleagues kind of encouraging you to take the, so, and that speaks to their privilege to a certain degree, that they would have a level of empathy that, oh, I'll stay here and work, but you take the day off, you've earned it, you know? And that's kind of ironic, you know, maybe not intentional, but could maybe be perceived as a bit backhanded, or again, just maybe a bit privileged to take such a stance, you know? I mean, imagine the gall of me showing up to work on Christmas Day. No, you guys all go home. You know, I think I'm just going to man the fort today. It would just ring so weird, regardless of religious affiliation, identity, support. You know, so it's ironic that you know, again, same with Arizona. Overwhelmingly, the white constituency went to work on MLK Day, and it became kind of a running joke that the Black people took the day off. That in and of itself is problematic.
Yeah, I think I've gone back and forth, and actually I'd love to hear other people's opinion, because I've wondered more so with MLK Day, because Juneteenth being a federal holiday is relatively new. There was a part of me that wondered if that the day off was representative of what Dr. King would think of. And I say, now, do you think he said, okay, to celebrate me, take all the kids out of school, you know, go home, chill, you know, or do something. So I think I had a preference more for the service or some type of involvement or recognition. But at the same time, I think it does insist that he be recognized. So I think ultimately it goes to however you choose to do it. It makes sense to you. But for me, I did kind of question if this was a recognition. How are we really recognizing the work that Dr. King did? And I'll say even on Juneteenth, back to the question, so what do we do to recognize and celebrate, honor, and acknowledge Juneteenth, what it is about, and what does it represent even now for people?
And knowing that self-care is care. So if you do nothing, don't feel completely bad about it.
Well, that's what I said. It has to be, ultimately, I say it has to be an individual, but I would kind of question it because kind of like what you were saying, is it all about just kind of, you know, barbecuing and celebrating without the recognition? But then also remember, like I said before, I was raised by a very radical father. So we were in the parades and we were at the summer festivals and we were writing book reports and we were, you know, presenting and dance and things like that. So everybody's lived experience is different.
So true. You know, Parham had this great descriptor in the paper, and I'd be curious on people's take. He talked about mental conditioning, you know, and how a lot within white supremacy, Black bodies are conditioned to act and play and think small, and it kind of stifles creativity. And, going back to the reference about the broken wing and mending it and the importance of giving that bird flight again. And he talks about the shackles of conceptual incarceration. And that line really stuck out to me, the shackles of conceptual incarceration. Would anyone like to kind of take a swipe at that and maybe how it would apply to them or their interpretation of it?
You know what? When I read this, because I went to college back in the Stone Age. So when I went to college,
We are not old ones.
first generation wasn't a term, it wasn't a thing. And then when I was reading this yesterday and today, and I was reading some of Dr. Parham's terms, I was like, oh my gosh. And it just took me back to when I remember as a student at Kent State, I walked into a physics class, and it was just a general education class. And the faculty, the professor, he would point, you go on this side, you go on this side, you go on this side, till we all were in the class. And then and it was the first day of class. And after we came in and sat down, he opened it up and said, I put some of you on this side and some of you on this side for a reason. He said, those over here, he said, you're going to be okay. He said, but those over here, he said, you're not going to pass my class. He said, so you might as well go and drop it now. And, and as an 18 or 19-year-old, how, when I think about it now, I was like, dang, he just basically was like, you gonna fail it anyway. And of course, me, I went on ahead and dropped the class because I was like, I'm not trying to fail it, because I was on that side where he said you all were not going to be successful. But when you're a student at that age, you don't think of things like that. You don't have
the agency. You're still developing agency, and how to kind of, fight for yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's like sometimes I will reflect on things, and then it just kind of makes me bubble up inside, because I'm like, I don't want our students that are coming in now in this day and age, I don't want them to have those experiences. Like, what can I do as a person of color, as an administrator here at this little private college? What can I do to my 4% of Black students that are going to be here to make them feel like you belong here? Don't let professors sit and tell you that you can't do what you need to do, or that you can't write, or that, so it's like, what can I do to be that catalyst to be able to help those students?
Yeah,
I would pay for that to happen now.
Yeah, and it still does. I think professors have the potential to be the biggest bullies that ever existed, especially when they know they're armed with a knowledge base that benefits them. Part of President Parham's article, his paper, he talked about this idea within the current construct of higher education, and maybe education writ large, this idea that it strips students of their identity. They become strangers to themselves, their culture. It numbs them to their current condition. And then also, I think it creates a condition where students lack empathy towards acts of oppression or violence because they're conditioned to accept it. And so this whole idea of agency, and as a young person, I always joke, I used to give these talks. I had this buddy of mine when I was a kid. I grew up in San Diego, and I had a lot of friends. You live in a military town, you just have a lot of friends, on all different levels, Black, white, rich, poor. And there's this really cool family, and they were just cool, but they had money. And the way his son walked and talked, I used to say, man, like, no one ever broke his spirit. No one ever told him no. No one ever kind of put roadblocks in front of him where at the age of, as early as 5 or 6, if you're a young person of color, Black, brown, certain shades of yellow and red, respectfully, you have to learn to navigate choppy waters at such an early age that, again, it stifles this idea of creativity. It stifles this idea, and Parham said it beautifully with the Ellington quote, this idea of being a bird and having the ability to fly. I think before you fly, you have to have the vision and the inspiration. And before any of that happens, you have a broken wing. And so this idea of agency, I think, is so important. And some people are afforded it much earlier than others. Wanda James, I believe your hand's up.
Yes, one of the things I think it should begin with is really in the elementary and middle schools. I know we're in higher education, really, to be truth be told, should really start at home, but if home doesn't know, it should at least start in the education, lower education part, because I find that I hear this time and time again, some guidance counselors are not very helpful in providing positivity and knowing that they have the can-do and the wherewithal, or just being realistic with the student. I think also too, when it comes to Juneteenth and all the other holidays, it really should be an activity, a form, especially if like DOE, for example, here in New York, won't close the doors, let's say, for example, on Juneteenth, but at least have some day of activity, not necessarily schoolwork or homework. So that way the empathy, the understanding, the knowledge, and being able to be free of expression could start there at a young age.
I like that. I agree. Jacqueline?
That would be me, huh? So Roz, to answer your question, what I've done at my institution, I let my students know that I see you, right? And I make eye contact, I acknowledge them. I may not always be able to go and say something to them in the moment, but I definitely lock eye, and then, you know, I'll reach out to them. It did not ever matter to me what school they were in. And that goes around, and the students tell the students, and you become that person. And so, and yes, sometimes we have to bear that weight, but for me, it was important. And Lord, and this is why I've been there for so long, because then they would say, don't leave me, even though they were going to leave me in 2 or 4 years. And I tell them they're selfish, but they know you're going to tell them the truth. They know you're going to be there for them. And you're also going to get with them if they are wrong too. And so that goes a long way. And so that's what I've always done. And so they sometimes refer to me as Auntie Jackie or Miss Jackie, or I was their HBCU for them.
Now, to pursue that train of thought a bit further, and I'll be curious from my Black colleagues and my white allies and homies. One, do you think that's an undue or unfair burden as a Black professional? The extra work, the added layer of the crown of auntie, uncle, you know, campus mom. And going back to this idea of Juneteenth and intrinsically being the canary in the coal mine, in a sense, we're still kind of playing catch up. So that's one part of it. And to my white allies, do you wear that the same way, or is it different?
You know what? I think while I don't see it as a burden, you know what? I've always just lived with the whole, it's just other duties as a sign. Because when students come to see me, I'm not going to turn them away, especially since I've always worked at PWIs. So I know if a student or students are coming to see me, they're genuine and they're looking for some guidance, you know. So I would never want a student to say, well, you know, no, don't go see Ms. Roz because she's not going to help you. Especially a student of color. I don't care if they're Black, red, green, blue. No, if you need to come see me, come see me. So I've always I'm like Jackie, I've always just lent myself to, you know, my office is in 128. And a lot of times, you know, white counterparts or white allies, they don't understand. You know, they don't, you know, if a student is calling you Auntie Roz in the hall, they don't understand. They have a funny look on their face. And no, I do not explain it. But, you know, but no, they don't understand that. But to me, it's just, I don't know. I just feel like it's just something that for me personally, that I am called to do in addition to my registraring.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And I didn't see it as a burden too. As a matter of fact, I intentionally put myself in that place to do those things. So, and I've always put myself in places, even though I knew what it was going to take and a challenge, even though this role now, I was like, okay, Jackie, you asked for this. You knew what it was for, so you do this. And I honestly feel and believe wholeheartedly that it is my purpose. This is why I am here on this earth and in this space.
It is a calling. Aaron, please jump in.
My bad, I can't figure out how to put on my camera or anything like that. Hi, everybody. No, I was just gonna say, I was just listening, and maybe it's a lot to ask. Maybe it is. It probably is. It probably is a lot to ask. But for me, it's like a badge of honor. This is what I'm here to do. I'm very excited. I feel very happy when a person of color comes into my office and they ask for the registrar and they see it's me. I can see in their eyes that they're happy that it's me. So I think similar to Jackie, I've always kind of put myself in situations. I have inserted myself into situations so that they can see me. I've always worked at predominantly white institution. I think some of the people on here, I've spoken about this to them in California. It's when I go to AACRAO, this is when I see the most people of color that are in admissions or registrar. That's the only time that I see. So in California, I mean, I'm not, at this institution, it's much better, but typically at my other institutions, it's just been me. I will be the only person of color at that meeting. So yeah, when students see me, they don't see people like me very often here. So I'm very happy to be here, and it is probably a lot. It probably is too much to expect so much. That is a heavy burden to put on you. But when you are, and I think Gwendolyn, you said you had I forgot what you said about your father. I'm sorry. He was
A radical.
Radical. There we go.
Yes, radical. Yes.
So my mother was affiliated with the Black Panther Party. So I understand. So for me, just from like my upbringing, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Even if I am the only one, this is what I'm supposed to do. So I acknowledge, I smile, that head nod, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, hey, how you doing? But it's an honor to have the privilege to be able to do this.
Yeah, it reminds me, a good buddy of mine, I don't think he coined it, but he always says it and I love it. He says, you have to see mirrors of leadership reflected back at you. My good friend, Lawrence Alexander. Lawrence always says, Rock, you have to have mirrors of leadership reflected back at you. And I think for first generation Black students, when they see Black leadership on campus, that is very emblematic. Now with that, Wanda, I want to call on you for your comment, but also if you could speak to, I believe it was Shanae's question, how do you avoid burnout? Even when you don't realize it's happening. Erin said it. She does it because it's in her soul, but you have to be careful of potential burnout. So Wanda, please give us your take.
I just wanted to say what Erin said, and I do agree, there is some part of it where it does feel like a burden, but on the flip side, I think working at an institution such as like NYU, they have opened up a lot of information and actually have committees happening throughout the campus, which allows us to interact with different cultures and understand each other. So Juneteenth is one of, and of course, other types of events that we celebrate. The nicest thing is when too much is given, much is required. So I think with the knowledge base and the information and the people willing to open up and learn and listen, it's not really a burden, I think, in my opinion. I think it's great to share information. I like to give information. And if I don't know something, I'm still willing to research and learn. And I think that to me is actually key. in growing and in learning. So I'm glad this university is so open for that.
Yeah, I think, please.
I was gonna say, I think it's two things. I think some folks, and I'll say, I think a lot of times it is primarily women are conditioned to be that kind of nurturer. When we talk about wings, to be up under the wings if they do happen to get broken. So I think that there's some condition to that. And then some of it, I think, is just, it is intrinsic. It is a strength. And there are some people who strive and are driven to be that person. And then if you happen to be a person to where you have that conditioning and it is your strength as well, you do also risk burnout. And that's where you have to, pay attention to self and self-care. That old saying, a drowning person can't save someone. So if you are empty, there's not a lot that you can do. And so it's equally as important to build yourself up or have groups like this who can fill you back up so that you can go back out there. And I think some of it is just, I think the what you have to do, because if not you, then who? Especially if if there isn't a lot of representation where you are on your campus. And I do the same thing. And when I walk through campus, number one, I wear my name badge. And that was because some older women got on me and said, why do you have a name badge that doesn't say doctor or PhD? People need to understand and see that there are Black people who have PhDs or who have doctor in front of their name. Because initially I was kind of shy, like, well, nobody needs to know that. I know I did it, so I'm good. And they said, no, it's not about you. It's about everybody else around you. And so wearing my name badge and then speaking to people, and some of that is just my nature. My mother used to say, you'll speak to anybody, and I will speak to anybody, everybody, because I think that might be the only smile that somebody sees. And if they can relate that to me, then that'll help somebody.
Oh, I agree. And Jackie's point is real. Burnout, it's not, unidirectional, it's omnidirectional. As Black leaders, I've argued before, for us, there is no sideline. We're always in the fray. There is no lobby of Black professionals where you can run into between meetings and just kind of shake it off. And so this idea of burnout comes because you have to manage up, down, out, and more importantly, manage what's behind you. And so I think this idea of fatigue comes about, and it's something that Dr. Kwame Bakenra at the University of Utah, a good friend of mine, coined. He says racial battle fatigue. Whether you're dealing with racism flat out, microaggressions, whether you're dealing with systemic pillars of racism, that are kind of ingrained within the culture, that happens. Yolanda, you mentioned that you just learned about Kwanzaa recently. How recently, and can you tell us that story to self-discovery?
Well, I learned it from this webinar or Zoom meeting when the president mentioned it. And so I looked it up and because I never heard the term before. And so it was very interesting to know and to learn about that and how long it's been going, and some of the principles around it. And so, with the Native Americans and with Hispanics, it's the same thing. And I suppose Asians, it's really about getting out there and representing and educating people about your culture and finding ways to do that. And it makes a difference. I think the more people know, the better.
Yeah, I think one good thing about this hyper-connected, communication world that we're in now, clearly in this Star Trek Zoom space, I think transparency and becoming better informed. I'm so much better informed about the struggles of my Asian brothers and sisters. I'm really so much better informed about the struggles of my Indian brothers and sisters. And, when we were younger, I think a good chunk of us, I'm 49, again, education was very, one way. We talk, you listen. I think now education comes in through myriad channels, formal and informal. And so however you can gain knowledge is always appreciated. Oftentimes within the institute, within the academy, we joke that we preach to the choir, but the choir still has to sing. And so in order to sing, you need practice. And the fact that you learned about Kwanzaa recently means you can sing a new tune and hopefully inform somebody else. So it's never too late to share good information. So thank you so much for sharing that and just being a bit vulnerable within this space. So were there any other takeaways? And yes, Sinead, you're right. The feedback regarding burnout is appreciated, just making us all better informed. Were there any other takeaways from the article? It was really insightful. And I know Dr. Parham, and I'll say that respectfully. I know him better than he knows me. My start was within the Cal States. I was at Cal Poly Humboldt, at the time Humboldt State University, and Parham was already a big deal and a bit of a name then. So in reading those words, I could hear his voice come to life. But were there any other takeaways from the article? Any other reflections on the concept of Juneteenth and what it could or should mean, or what it means to you?
Rock, I don't have any reflection on the article, but I have a reflection on what you just said and what Yolanda just mentioned, that, you know, that's why it's something. This is what I shared. I went to AACRAO last week and did a message. So that's Florida AACRAO, for those who don't know. And so the education piece, talking about how we don't know, right? Still to this day, we don't know. And what is happening today, they want to take away this education piece, so we still won't know, right? And so what I said there was that we cannot sit in silence and allow legislation of invisibility. We cannot let all of our identities to be erased, because that is what is trying to happen. So we cannot be inactive while they're being active in this legislation and in trying to erase all of us on the screen, our Asians, our Native Americans, the Black, some whites, and I say some whites because back in the day, there was Irish, there was German, there was these separate identities that has been grouped into one. And so we cannot, and yes, it will happen, but if we don't say anything, we don't do anything, that makes it okay. Our silence signals it's okay. We are not invisible. We cannot allow them to legislate that invisibility. We have to remain active. We cannot sit in silence. We have to be resistance, and we cannot allow us individuals and our identities to be erased. And so, and if that happens, you know, look how much further back we will be if what we're talking about Juneteenth and Kwanzaa today. There are other things that will not be known in the future that we need to know. And so it is important that we remain active. We remain active in who we are. We remain active in our identities. And what I also said in the chat, that, you know, it is not the students that burn us out. It is these policies and these practices and these lack of commitments that drive us crazy. And so we have to surround ourselves with our own personal board of directors. Somebody you can go and you know, it's like, before I say this to them, let me say this to you. And so you need to surround yourself and do a check-in. It's like, is it me? You know, am I wrong here or what? And so surround yourself with some personal board of directors.
Amen. That is so 100% true. I couldn't have said it better. It is about support, you know, because again, sometimes you're burning out and you really don't realize it. Now, back to this idea of erasure, because that's essentially what's happening. They're trying to erase us from the textbooks. What's going on in Florida, what's going on in pockets of Texas and Georgia, do you see that being more of an echo chamber, or do you think that is gaining national spotlight and support? Anyone can chime in.
national for me.
I think
It's,
Chris can.
it's, yeah. At first, it seemed like a few desperate pockets, but now I think, you know, the cadence and how it's bubbling up, you know, and how things are tracking. So I think you're right as far as staying vigilant. You know, it's an old line. Some people say Shakespeare, some people say Batman, I'm not sure, but it's that old philosophy that evil doesn't sleep, it waits. And Jacqueline, you're right. I think they're playing very much an insidious long game that runs along the lines of religion, that runs along the lines of white identity and politics, that runs along the lines of white supremacy, you know, that runs along the lines of government. And they have these structures that support that, that position them well within that, where every now and again, you'll have a Barack Obama. Every now and again, you'll have, you know, a Cory Booker, a Maxine Waters. You know, every now and again, you'll see an AOC. The Trumps, the DeSantis's, you know, they seem to bubble up a little more regularly. And it's funny how history kind of remembers those people, you know, moving forward. So I think vigilance, like you said, is just key. Great point. Thank you so much.
Chris,
We have
were you gonna say something? Sorry.
Yeah, we have about 9 minutes, please.
No, Chris, what are you gonna say? Do you have your?
Oh, no, yeah, I did, but it's all right. Rock was rocking, so I didn't want to interrupt. But I just to answer his question, but as Jackie was talking, one of the things about the article that kind of stuck with me was kind of towards the end where he talked about the divine dissatisfaction in terms of this systemic changes that need to happen in higher education that we all kind of face. And so those are some of the key takeaways is like, yeah, kind of echoing what you were saying, Jacqueline, about, you know, speaking up.
Stop calling me Jacqueline.
Sorry, Madam President. You know,
I
that
meant
sometimes
Jackie.
silence is complicit, you know, so those are some of the things that were just kind of a key takeaway for me. And I just appreciate people just chiming in. I'm learning lots too. And one of the things that's I think strikes me as a person of Asian background is just some of the shared experiences that you know, like Raj and other people were saying about, hey, being an advocate for people at PWIs, right? And so that's a shared experience that I can relate to, and just appreciate other people just jumping in. Thank you.
I'm gonna throw my 2 cents and then I want somebody else to say something. I think, and it kind of goes, well, one of the questions was how do we prevent broken wings? How do we help broken wings to heal? And I think part of it has to be a collective effort. There is within these loud voices, and I don't know if it's a lot of voices or it's just the most loud voices have become even more loud. And we live in a world where media will emphasize the loudest voices, right, wrong, or indifferent, but there has to be collective effort. There is a theme or a vein, at least from my opinion, of that divide and conquer. So if you can divide all people against themselves, there's no way that they can come together and do the work that needs to be done. And I think these kind of conversations and a collective effort from everybody, and not a this is just for me or just for us or this, that, and the other, because we are all impacting the lives of children. I think we get to see it in a different way from the lens of education. We get to see the impact as they're coming to our institutions, as they're living lives at our institutions, and those who are leaving our institutions, and not always in a positive way. So it has to be a collective effort. It really has to be a collective and unified effort of everybody to celebrate everybody, and make sure that is obvious and open, done very publicly and continuously. That's my 2 cents. Now somebody else can jump in.
That's great 2 cents. Anyone else want to jump in? Any insights? There's a few minutes left, about 6 minutes.
I'll jump in. I think my takeaway from this is part of the thing I've been going through lately is holding my institution accountable. They have this OEDI department that they started in 2020 because they were in a lot of a mess with racial accusations. And so they hired this consultant full-time. So I don't hold back my tongue, and I'll probably get fired one day for it, but I hold them accountable for what they say they're going to do. And I think my takeaway from this is, okay, so you're OEDI, don't just write about this in an email. Let's do something and show our students. I mean, we have a BSU, we have all these organizations. I don't see you doing anything. That there's just not the action that should be taken. So I think that's my takeaway, is to get people to move, and I hold them accountable.
Yeah, I joke with a friend that I've marched and protested, and I've missed more flights than he's caught. I said I need someone a little younger and a little angrier than me to keep up the good fight. So we have to keep inspiring the youth and get those young legs in there. People forget that it was a bunch of 6th through 8th graders during the civil rights who helped change the face of that and gain traction. So yeah, we have to keep priming the pump. We have to hold people accountable and keep pulling people in. Any other insights?
There's a lot of institutions out here, as I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of institutions out here that are talking the talk, but they damn sure ain't walking the walk. And it's very frustrating. It really and truly is. And it's kind of I always look at it as that whole I'm not racist, I live next door to a Black person kind of thing. And so I just urge and encourage all of you, without losing your jobs and getting walked out the door. If you see something, you have to say something. And and there's a way that it can be said. Of course, if we say it, it's probably going to be taken out of context or what have you. But still, in all, at least I said it, and at least you heard it. So it's because there has to be some more accountability. Not everybody chooses to go to a predominantly white, a HBCU. And so there are people that go to, students that go to PWIs more often than going to HBCUs. But, it really struck me. I sit on a retention intervention team, and I looked at this spreadsheet of 50 students here. Now, mind you, we only have 1,300 students. So there's 50 students on this spreadsheet. And out of that 50, not one student said they were considering leaving because of academics.
Wow.
It was all about, I don't feel like I belong. The town is not embracing people of color, or the town is not embracing of LGBTQIA students. So people put this, we have these recruiters out here, and institutions put this on their websites, but then when students get here, it's so disheartening and it's disappointing, because basically this student feels like we sold them a bag of magic beans. It's not good.
Yeah.
And so we have to say, if you see it, you have to say something. We have to do that. It's a burden. It's not a burden, but it's a lift. It's another lift, but we have to do that.
Yeah, students are not coming to school for the reasons in which the older generation went to school. Meaning you go to school, you get a good job, but students are coming to school. You've got your student population that are the doctors and the lawyers, and they know they have to go to school because that's their goal, to be that. You have your students that are looking for a sense of community. And they choose their school like that. And then you have another population of students that are looking for financial reasons, meaning what is most affordable for me. So it is different type of students that we're catering. We have to realize that we're just not dealing with that group of just brick and mortar, like just come learn and go off. No.
Yeah, but Chris is right though. Silence, is complicit, is complicity. And it's that old adage, Rosalind said it best, you might not be racist, but you are okay with the way racists talk if you don't push back. And so that lands in the same place for me.
This is a great discussion. I love how I was able to pop on at the end and be like, oh, I'm still warm and fuzzy. I was listening, just had to pick up my kids. So I apologize, I wasn't on camera.
Yeah.
But thank you all. As we said, this is being recorded, and I believe how will they be able to get it, Belmont? just, will it be sent out or just on the AACRAO site to search and look for?
On the AACRAO site by clicking on the link, yes.
Okay.
Real quick before we go, Michelle Weller, I just saw your comment and I am in full support of that. So if we can make that happen, let's do that.
Just saw it too. Great. Thank you all for your time and your wonderful discussion.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great one.
Be well.